Hello, everyone. We're Sky and Mackayla, and today we welcome Ebonie Smith to the soundtrack of our lives. She, among other things, is the founder of Gender Amplified, a nonprofit organization with a focus on being advocates for gender diverse folks in the worlds of production and engineering within the music industry. She'll share more about the organization and the challenges of advocating towards gender diversity. Welcome. We're really glad to have you here.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here, and happy Pride.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Pride
Happy
Month.
Pride. So, can you explain us and our listeners in a few words what Gender Amplified means to you and what it is?
Absolutely. So Gender Amplified is a nonprofit organization that supports women of all kind and non-binary music producers, helping to advance their careers and find opportunities to professionalize themselves in the music business. But also we like to think of music production as an art form in and of itself that helps to create a sense of value for an individual, that gives an outlet for self-expression and also for the development of self-esteem. Right. So music production for us is not just about getting in the music business and making money. I mean, that's a great cherry on top, if a person can do that, but also exposing potential artists who are female identifying, women of all kind, exposing them to the craft and the art we find to be extremely beneficial. And we like to facilitate that through the work that we do.
That's amazing. So how can someone be part of the Gender Amplified? How can you join or be part of it or be involved?
Right. Gender Amplified is not membership based. Much of the work that we do happens through our music production camps, which are private and exclusive. They're invite only. But we do have an application process that we send out as a means of vetting the potential producers that we engage with and then are involved with and invite to our camps. Over the years, we have done events that are open to the public. So it's important that persons who want to be involved with our movement, they follow us on social media and stay appraised of the things we have going on through that.
Yeah, that's great.
We're wondering how the idea for Gender Amplified came about and what motivated you to start it.
I was an undergraduate student at Barnard College of Columbia University, and I was responsible for writing a senior thesis as a means of graduating. And by that time, over the course of the 4 years, I became very interested in music production as an art form, but also I decided that I wanted to be a music producer. And at the time, I thought I was the only girl with such aspirations. I just didn't see anyone who looked like me out there in the world producing hit records. It was just the Neptunes and Timbaland and, Dr. Dre, some of the other big producers that I admired so much at the time producing in hip hop were the most visible. This was at a time when producers started to become more visible. They came from behind the curtain and you kind of got to see the wizards behind the magic. And so I remember thinking, that seems like a really cool job, and started to do some research into what it meant to be a music producer. And I didn't see any women doing it. I certainly didn't see many women helming the technology and employing it and using studios and equipment. I didn't really see that. So I set out to identify women who were out there working as producers, but also who aspired to be producers if they weren't actively in the business, and who were using technology to make music. I had no frame of reference for that. And on campus where I was, there was a record label, but most of the producers were men. And so I was like, okay, well, this seems like an interesting query. And went to my senior thesis advisor and I said, well, if I have to write this paper, I want to write it on something I care about. And I want to write it specifically on women music producers working in hip hop. And my advisor at the time gave me her blessing. And so I started on the path of doing this ethnography, which in New York City, the birthplace of hip hop, you can imagine it was very fertile terrain to identify these women. If they were somewhere, they'd be in New York City. And for sure, I started finding all these pockets of women MCs and DJs and producers. And it was just fantastic to unearth this community that was nested within a community that was nested within a community that was nested within a community. Right. So as you had, the hip hop community, and within that, there was a producer community. Within that, there was hip hop producers. Within that, there were these women who were producing music. So you had to go really deep within the surface of hip hop culture in the early 2000s to find these women. And unbeknownst to me, not only did I find these producers, but I started identifying organizations, very much so in the spirit of Gender Amplified, who were doing this work. And at the time, it wasn't work because everyone knew that there was a disparity when it came to the ratio of women to male producers or female to male producers. Everybody knew there was a disparity, but it was accepted and it wasn't necessarily an issue, right? It has become an issue today. But back then it was more like, yeah, you have like maybe for every one woman producer, you have like 10 guys and, you just got to find those women. They're pretty great, if you could find one. So I started looking for them and I found DJ Coco Chanel, DJ Jazzy Joyce, like some incredible legends on the hip hop scene. And they were still out there kicking and making records. And in addition to not more beginners and novices who were also doubling as DJs. And so I wrote this thesis paper on these women. And also I decided to couple it with a project that I was calling a conference. And so I went back to the same thesis advisor. I was like, hey, I'm finding all these really cool women. None of them know each other. I think that's an issue. So the conference became about finding these women and then bringing them together for a day-long conference on campus.
That's really cool.
I think it's very important because I think still nowadays when you go into music production, they're always going to be in your classroom. There's going to be, like you said, 10 guys. And there's going to be 1 or 2 girls interested in like studying music production. And we have discussed this before, and we don't know if maybe women are afraid of like going into the career, or because there's not a lot of like known female music producers that they can like see and like admire and be that's something that they can do as well, or if they're not as interested. But it's very, very important to do these things that you're doing so like more women can join the industry. It's very important to have more women representing us and making music and creating these safe spaces for other female or non-binary artists that might be a little bit scared to work with men.
Right. It's important to have diversity. Just the terms can be very simple. I think we overcomplicate it a lot of times. I think people like to make music with folks they like, people that they have shared experience with. And to be honest, if I could make music with my friends all the time, I would. None of them, they don't make music. They don't make beats. I have a few of them that are lawyers. But if we all, made music, it would probably be some banging music, You know, this is my girl group, my friend group. I just love them to death. And we have so much shared experience. If we all made music together, it would sound great.
Yeah.
So when I think about the community that I've been able to develop through Gender Amplify, is pretty much like a bunch of girlfriends, that I just like, and that we have shared experience. So when we come together, it's not just because we are producers. We like each other.
Yeah.
So the conversations that we have end up being parts of the music. We just hang out, like we just like each other. So when we go to the studio, it's fortunate that I've been able to cultivate this community of women that would be my friends anyway, but I've had to seek them out. Because there are fewer of us, you have to kind of go out of your way. But the benefit is that you find all these producers who you like and who you would be friends with anyway. And you just, because there's shared experience. And I think that's something that a lot of the male producers, they have the advantage of making music with people that they like and they want to be around, the bros, like the homies. They just, they have their friends. And a lot of times these friend groups just become production groups. And so that is what is happening with Gender Amplified. I think is one of the most important ways to quote unquote change the conversation is to make sure women producers know each other. Because when we come together, it's always such a hang, it's just fun. It's a hang. We end up talking, we find out we have a lot in common. We have being the unicorns that we are in the business, we have a lot of shared experience without knowing each other, without meeting each other. So if you can get everybody together, it creates instant synergy. And then on top of that, what you mentioned about the artist is very true, because it's the same thing with them, right? So the women artists, they want to make music with folks that they can identify with, and their shared sensibility. The artist and the producer are sonically tethered.
Yeah.
A lot of times we're thinking the same things and wanting the same things without ever knowing it. So when we can get together without any interference, or without any, what I think of as cultural interference or cultural interjection, meaning that you have to have someone who intercedes for you technologically, but they don't come from your culture, right? If you're sharing space and sharing culture with a person, you're reading similar books, you're having similar physical and anatomical and physiology experiences, you're having similar cultural experiences with respect to how you present yourself in the world, how you move through groups, what you experience at work, what you might have experienced growing up, right? These are all things that women of all kinds, and also particularly cisgender women, we all kind of have this commonality. But what happens if there's cultural interference, if you have to bring someone in the studio that doesn't speak that language, and you have to wedge that person between you and your artistic output, things can get lost in translation, right? Some ideas might be imposed that are not inherent to how you perceive your art being representative of your experience. But when you add somebody to the signal chain, if you will, who has a similar lived experience, you might be thinking the same things and not even knowing it. So there are creative decisions that you're making that might actually be you in conversation with someone who is similar to you, or who has had a similar experience to yours. So, the perfect example I give to that is like all the artists, young female artists that I come across that don't want drums in their songs. They just don't want drums in their songs. And I'm sitting there like, yeah, I could mute the drums. I don't really need them either. Like I just kind of want to hear you floating on top of some melodies and some lush chords. And like, that's the song versus someone coming in from outside of that shared brain trust and going, we need drums. We have to have them. Like, this song isn't a song without the drums. Like, where are the drums? Like, it needs a beat. Well, that's coming from a different lived experience. That's coming from a different set of creative vantage points that are coming from a culture that might be very used to there being bombastic, very disruptive sounds. When you think about some of the artists that have been champions for women, Joni Mitchell, Taylor Swift, like these are folk artists, essentially. These are artists that don't need a whole lot of bombastic bass in their music for them to identify with it, right? So when you have a producer in the signal chain that can say, your instincts are right, can actually affirm the artist's instincts. I find that a lot of young female producers can really identify with that, and they feel like there's a protection when it comes to their ideas, but that's because there's a producer sitting in the room that is actually sharing in their brain trust. They're actually affirming those creative decisions because they actually agree with them.
Yeah.
Not just simply trying to hold space. They actually know, I agree that your instincts are appropriate, right? So I like to think of myself as a type of producer that listens and can affirm like a lot of young female artists. And I'm really a proponent of wanting to see more young female artists work with established female producers.
Yeah.
Going off that, how does Gender Amplified increase the representation of women and non-binary music producers so that these young female artists can find them?
Right. So one of the things that we've done over many years is hold music production camp called the CTRL Room Series. We're in our 4th year of this particular program. And this camp is typically built around artists, but also it's built around creating opportunities for producers to get their music out in the world. So sometimes we will partner with a television network like Fox. We recently paired with them to do all the music for their pilot programs that will be coming out in the fall. So we have partnered with individual artists to put on camps for them. And so it's an opportunity for us to identify artists who are looking to work with women producers and who are actually wanting to take that stance. We can actually use our resources and our operational staff to put together camps, usually over the course of 2 to 3 days, that help to pair these individuals together, because I believe lots of women artists in particular are looking for female creatives, music producers, women of all kinds to produce their records. They just don't know how to find them or even how to put together camp or how to create the right type of environment for that. So that's where we step in and help to facilitate by calling to our network of producers and then our network of studios that we use to facilitate the camp. And, camps come with lots of parameters. I think we've gotten it pretty down. We have an incredible camp operations manager. Shout out to Natalie Sears, who not only handpicks and curates all of the producers that will be at each camp, but also handles all the logistics. So with our camps, we have a studio partner that we've used for many years. We also provide food. We provide connections to various technology companies. If our producers need certain software or technology for the camps, we make sure that they have that provided. Quite a few of our camps are paid as well for the producers to come in and work. So we try to add as much value as we can so that under these circumstances, there are so few variables that the producers can and the artists that we bring together can really just focus on building relationship and building community and being able to produce great music.
Yeah, that's very important. I was going to mention for my next question that, I had a friend, she's a singer, and she went to a male producer. She wanted to do the song, right? And then he was like, you know what? I don't like that idea. I think you should sing that. And then I think you should have this. And he ended up completely changing the genre, changing everything. And I think it's like you were saying, like, there's nothing like working with people that would listen to you, understand what you want to do, and that you feel like you're in a safe space and like you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. So with that, like, what are some maybe other common challenges faced by women and non-binary individuals in the music industry?
I think with respect to the challenges, first of all, what your friend went through is fairly common, I would say, and I spoke about it earlier slightly, which is the imposing of creative ideas to the artist, which has had a place in production for a very long time. And this is not something that is specific to male producers. There have been female producers who have done the same thing, just because it has for a very long time been a tradition within the creative space of production that the producer is essentially like the director of the song album making process, and the artist has often been reduced to talent, very similar to how a director deals with an actor on set, right? The director has the final word, and their vision is one to be protected at all costs, even in the face of what the artist might want. And a perfect example of this is Quincy Jones' relationship with Michael Jackson when he was working on Off the Wall. There's a particular song on that album where, it ended up being one of the biggest records on that album, and Michael Jackson did not want strings at the top of the record. Quincy Jones imposed that there would be strings, and that song went on to be one of the greatest songs of all time, So it's examples like that give producers a lot of agency. However, as we're moving toward a more equitable society and a more equitable music business, I'm of the opinion that there has to be more flexibility, right? This is not the film industry. The music business is also not the business that it was in the 80s when Quincy Jones was working with Michael Jackson. Artists are coming with a lot of ideas to the table. And when it comes to creating, there has to be dialogue. There has to be a shared experience so that you get the most out of the process. And I think there has to be a willingness to at least try everything, right? If an artist brings an idea to the table, it's worth exploring, especially since in this day and age, the recording process is not as expensive as it used to be. Music production process cost a fraction of what it cost back in the day when decisions had to be made a lot quicker because it was so expensive to make a record. This era really lends to a lot more experimentation. It lends to a lot more options for everybody, a lot more options for the artist, a lot more options for the producer. So there should be more flexibility. I think the technology allows for that. I think the era of experimentation that we're a part of right now allows for that. You really just don't know what's going to work. Anything can get dropped on to TikTok and be an instant hit the next day. Out of nowhere. It's the Wild Wild West. You don't know what the public is going to receive. There's no way to put a clear finger on it. So there should be equal weight given to all ideas. that part of it, I think, is there's a bit of a learning happening right now and a bit of reconfiguring when it comes to roles, how they play out. There's so many artists self-producing, and so you're kind of, it's a good time. And I think because of all this, it's a great opportunity for women, and women of all kinds to step up plate and work as producers.
Yeah. If there are young women listening to this, what advice would you give them to make sure that they step into the role in a way that is productive for themselves and the artist?
I think so much of it is just proper communication, right? You might have all the technical skills, you might not, but if you can communicate well, and if you can trust your ideas, that's really the hallmark of being a great producer, is trusting your ideas, right? Not being so open to everybody else's ideas that you forget about your own, and try and get started. Just try. You might not have everything down, but as long as you're moving forward with it and you're actively doing it every day, I think that's enough, for wherever you are.
Yeah. So Gender Amplified has created like a few amazing projects so far. Can you maybe share with us one that you are especially proud of?
I think the thing I'm probably the most proud of is the CTRL Room Series, because it's produced a number of great recordings, one of which we recently released as a single called Future Number, which is an ode to growing up and developing from adolescence to adulthood. Is written by 3 artists that had never met each other and came together in the camp and penned this gorgeous song and produced it all in the same day. And it was recently placed in a Universal Music Pictures film called Tripped Up, which will be coming out soon, hopefully in 2023. And it was just such a beautiful song. And I'm thankful that the CTRL Room Series provides a space for artists to collaborate without pretense and with very few prompts, and can reach deep down within themselves to find an expression that is a shared expression, but also that is universal as far as its meaning and its impact. Because when I heard Future Number, I identified with it immediately. And the film producers were Tripped Up identified with it immediately. And it's my opinion that the world will identify with it for its lyric and its rhetoric. And it's a song written by 3 women who are in various stages in their development and in their lives, but found this commonality, found this common denominator with respect to wanting to reassess their childhood, their adolescence, in ways that were affirming and spiritually powerful. So the CTRL Room Series created that space. CTRL Room Series started as a proposal on paper in 2014 that became an actual camp by 2019, and that is now generating income for producers in 2023 and getting our music out to the larger world. So when I think about that trajectory, I'm very proud and very pleased, and it's something that I want to do for as long as I can.
Yeah, that's really amazing, just how it started and just took off. We were just actually about to ask you about Future Number because it's really a beautiful song. So you said that it kind of impacted people right away when they hear it. So what do you hope the impact has on people?
I hope it will allow people to reflect and be introspective as it pertains to their own lives. That's not something that happens very often in songs that are popular songs. And I believe that the song has a tremendous amount of pop appeal, but so much of the pop music today deals with lyricism that is very of the moment. It is rarely asking people to think along 3 different spans of time, which is the past, the present, and the future, and asking them to be very intentional about how they're thinking about those 3 different times as one lifespan, as one individual contribution and offering to the planet and to the universe. How is the whole trajectory one conversation that we're having with the universe? And I hope that particularly for women, that they hear it and feel at ease about what they've done with their lives, and that they feel encouraged by what's to come.
So what does a song creation process differs in an environment like the Control series or the Control Room series compared to like a typical music production settings?
Really, today there's no typical setting, which is why the Control Room series is so intentional about its setting, right? The last 5 camps have been in the same studio in Brooklyn called Hyper Ballad, which is in Bushwick. And we picked that studio and have been very faithful to that place because of the atmosphere and the environment. The studio owners are a part of the board of directors for Gender Amplified, and they really get the mission statement. And they do everything in their power to protect the sanctity of what we're hoping and always striving to create. So there's one variable that's eliminated, which is space. And that's a huge variable because the space really does determine how creativity flows all the way down to the temperature in the studio. Right. But the studio is fantastic in that it is an open space and there's lots of sunlight, there's lots of plants, and there's all of this technology. There's limitless sonic potential when you think about all the gear that they have. Modern gear, vintage gear is just a treasure trove for creative genius. Right. So the space is very important, and that is a variable that is an aspect that is not a variable that we can kind of control. The other thing is our pairings and the selection of different producers. We pair on the basis of strengths and weaknesses. We take intake through our application process. We take a lot of information about how each producer thinks of themselves, the type of technology that they want to use, that they're comfortable using, what their strengths are with respect to, do they write, do they create melodies, do they play any instruments. We take a tremendous amount of information about the individual artistic prowess to align them properly with other creatives and to do the proper curatorial work to ensure that there are clear designated roles for each producer in each room. Typically, our rooms are 3 to 4 producers, no more than 4 producers in each room. And we created that model through trial and error. We also provide food. We're very specific about the type of food we provide. We don't do pizzas and super carb dense foods just because that tends to make people lethargic. We also don't provide of alcohol or anything like that. Our camps are dry. People are more than welcome to bring drinks, but we do not provide that, once again, as a means of protecting the energy in the space. Really, for me, it's very critical to know, is to be sensitive to the fact that you never really know where people are coming from. There are so many people that suffer with addiction, so many people that suffer very quietly with addictive personalities. So, being sensitive to that and not really creating an environment where alcohol can be abused or any type of substances can be abused is also very important to do. So, when you think about the typical production environment, it could be a bedroom, it could be a major $5,000 a day studio. Gender Amplified, I like to think, takes the best of all of those worlds that production can happen in and tries to distill what it is that makes each scenario work, right? What makes the bedroom work, what makes the big sexy studio work. For example, in a major sexy studio, what works is really great gear,
Yeah.
So we have that, and we pair the bedroom feel to that, where anybody can come in and plug in their laptop and use very minimal equipment and have some tight, confined spaces. And, we're just taking the best of that world and bringing it in as well, where people cut the vocals in the same room. And it's not a very isolating vocal booth that a person has to go through, to get their artistic juices to flow. So we try to all the best of all the environments we can and create some very special concept that we then replicate over time and can interchange different producers and creatives in and out.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So how does Gender Amplified collaborate with and support the LGBTQ plus community?
So this year we're actually doing a really fun activation in Los Angeles, downtown LA, in collaboration with Warner Music Group. ERG which is an employee resource group called Q, and they are doing an activation this year downtown with Haley Kiyoko. So this is something we're very, very excited about and to be a part of. And fortunately, the Warner Music Group team, they reached out to us and wanted Gender Amplified to be a part of it. Obviously, Pride Month for us is a great time because so many of our artists and producers, have artists all over the country on various stages performing in various prides. Over the weekend, I went to see two of my artists. One was performing LA Pride, Madam Gandhi, and the other was in New York performing the Dragon Sisters. They were performing. So our individual producers are also very active, supporting artists through the work that they do, right? Producing for artists that are in the queer community, making sure that the soundtrack of queer society is being produced by a diverse set of producers. And I think that's wonderful that so many queer artists have embraced women producers and seek out women producers. I think that's something that is not talked about enough, just how many incredible queer artists are looking for women producers to make their music and recognize that there's a different expression there. There's a different mode of creating there.
Yeah. So, going through the same line, how does Gender Amplify address the specific challenges and barriers faced by the LGBTQ plus individuals within the music production and audio engineering industry?
One of our first CTRL Room Series events, it was operating under a different name at the time, was called the Sound Room. Before it was a CTRL Room, it was the Sound Room. And we did an event at Atlantic Records in 2017, and there was actually one trans woman who showed up. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm glad she's here. It just made the biggest difference that she was with us. And, what she brought to that particular session was so powerful. And I bring up that small anecdote just because I think holding space and creating a world where individualized experience with music production can be shared. I think the trans women in the music production community matters. Because there is a real knowledge that trans women are coming with that cisgender women may not have. And creating spaces for all of us to be there and working in community means so much as we lift the whole community up. There's definitely a shared experience, even though there are many differences. It matters that we all come together and are able to speak the same language. Now, that's the anecdotal experience, but on a larger scale, what we've been able to do is create so much space for our producers who are transitioning, who identify as non-binary, who are queer, who identify as lesbian. And I've seen over the years how their choices have influenced their music and how it is giving rise to so many rich and interesting ideas that are otherwise not present in a lot of the music that you hear. So the fact that our camps are really serving as an incubator for these artists, I think is a major contribution that we're providing to the larger LGBTQAI community.
Definitely. Yeah. We all need, the community definitely needs space just to be present. So do you have any personal highlights or experiences you want to talk that you witnessed within the Gender Amplified that highlight the power of gender diversity and inclusion?
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing is the change and the growth in all the producers that do the programming. I'm always at a loss for words when I see these producers going outside of our camps, continuing to collaborate and to make music together. And I just think we've just provided a great service for these artists to find each other, stay connected, and to build these friendships. And it goes back to what I said in the beginning of our conversation, which was people like to make music with folks they like. People tend to like folks who they share experience with, right? Irrespective of whether or not they've had those experiences together. If they've had similar experiences just on the basis of how they move through the world, how they perceive the world and how the world perceives them. Once they've had those experiences separately, when they come together, they're able to have those same experiences together. And it makes for not only great community building, but it makes for, the connections within that community, the interpersonal and individual connections within a larger community. It builds strong bonds and creates true friendships and sisterhood and kinship. And it's that part of it that I am very proud of, but also I'm very protective of that, it's something that I want to protect at all costs, and not to the extent that Gender Amplified isn't growing. I want us to grow, but I'm also very conscientious of the incubator-like nature that we are exhibiting and how it is actually maturing individuals. Because for me, the value is not necessarily in massive numbers of people that we change and affect, but the micro levels of the individualized change. Because my thought process behind it is, if you can change 10, then each of those 10 people will go on and change 10 apiece, and each of those 10 apiece will change 10 more. And in time, you get the real diversity that you're craving. It doesn't happen overnight. It didn't take 24 hours for us to get in the shambles that we're in socially. Thanks to hegemony, patriarchy, sexism, misogyny. It didn't take 15 minutes to get there. It's not going to take 15 minutes to iron it out.
Yeah, definitely. So how do you envision the future of the music production and audio engineering industry with regards of gender equality?
It's really hard to say as it pertains to the future, but I will say as it pertains to what I've actually witnessed over the last 15 years. When I first started Gender Amplified in 2007, there was no conversation around women producers. There were a handful of communities that were very insular, that were creating space and holding platform for women producers or woman-identified producers. There was that. I wouldn't call it a movement. Now there is a movement. And, when I first started going to audio trade conferences in the early 2000s, I might be the only woman there. Now, when I go to the National Association of Music Merchants Conference or the Audio Engineering Society Conference, I see a plethora of women. And not only that, I see mobilized initiatives. So, for example, at the National Association of Music Merchants, there now exists an arm of that organization called NAM, Women of NAM. So you see a lot of mobilizing and also just real investment in terms of time and investment in terms of finances into alleviating some of the issues that affect women in audio and women in music production. I will also say that the Annenberg research that's coming out of USC has become a very important and trailblazing component to why there is true movement and true institutional advancement in this area. And I think if there is that type of continuous effort, we will see in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years, I think we will start to really see real growth as it pertains to women producers making long-lasting impact. If we're just looking at the charts, which I think is problematic to just look at the charts. If we're just looking at the charts, then it ends up being kind of dismal and discouraging. But if we look at the larger landscape of independent artistry, independent record releases, I think there's a more hopeful narrative that can be gleaned from that. Having said that, I understand why there is such hyper focus on the Billboard charts and songs that have massive impact financially, because what we don't want is more women producing, but for all of the profits and all the professional opportunities to be nested in this very confined space that is primarily dominated by male producers. So there is a value to looking at how true equity is being navigated, for the lack of a better word. I mean, when we're thinking about true equity, the E in the DEI, right? It cannot be lost on us the effect of corporate engagement in music and corporate relationships and the power dynamics associated with the trifecta that is the three largest record labels: Universal Music Group, Warner Music Group and Sony Music Entertainment. We have to look at that because that is the infrastructure that is upholding the power structure and how music makes money in society. The music business is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and I think women of all kind should be able to participate in that rich lineage, right? Not just in the finances of it, but the lineage of how it is being shaped and cared for, essentially, over this human experience that we're all having, because we're all experiencing and participating with the music, we're all engaging with, but we're not all being blessed by the prosperity, which I think is problematic. In a nutshell, I have hope. And there's been a lot of growth in the time that I've been in the music business. So I presume that there will continue to be growth.
Yeah, definitely.
So since Gender Amplified started, what challenges have you encountered promoting gender diversity in the industry?
I think the biggest challenge right now is there's not, how do I word this? I wanted to word it one way and I was like, wait, don't say it like that. I think the biggest challenge now is there is conversation happening publicly, but there is not an equal amount of activity happening privately. And that's where I can put it.
No, that makes sense.
We have a lot of conversation going, but the behind the scenes is still operating the same way.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
And there's a level of dishonesty with that is in some ways more insidious than just outwardly being like, we don't hire women producers. I think is a little more sinister to actually posture as if there's interest in addressing an issue when there really isn't. So I think there has to still be, you can't just throw money at things. You can't just do stuff for optics. There's real basic ways that corporate interests can actually engage this conversation. It's very easy. For some reason, there's still quite a bit of red tape.
Yeah. So why do you think big companies or big studios or record labels or whatever are kind of scared of hiring female or non-binary music producers? And why do you think they keep going for male producers? Do you think there's like that comfort zone of always being male producers? Or is there maybe something else that they are scared of? Or
it's about as simple as why there's never been a female president in the United States. This is easy to understand. If you can understand that, you can understand why. It's perceived incompetence. There's a lot that has to be proven for corporations to take risk on women producers in mass. It's one thing to take a risk on one or two here or there. But if those come with a weighted cosign from a powerful male producer, it's even easier. But there is perceived incompetence. She just doesn't look like she can do the job. And even if she can do it, the optics of it, it just doesn't look right. And it doesn't look like it makes sense. She could be the perfect person for the job, but I think there's literally a visual hurdle. I think there's a visual for a lot of people. It's just that it doesn't, when you walk into a big studio and there's a woman there doing all the work and managing all the relationships, there's a challenge that she will face that is purely based on the way she looks. And that's part of it. The other part of it is comfort zone, just going with what works, right? Like, this works. And let's just keep the ball rolling as we have. We can go back and forth to the same 5 producers that we know we can get a certain product out of because they've built up a certain brand integrity and a certain awareness with the public, as well as with the corporation itself and with other artists, right? So there's that too. And there's this huge head start that I think just comes with how a lot of producers even get involved with production. There's a huge head start that I think a lot of women aren't able to necessarily take advantage of. A head start in the business, but also just a head start in society with respect to when they were introduced to production, how they got into it. It's still a passed down art. I didn't even get into it until I was 18.
Yeah.
I didn't even know anybody. Like a lot of the young guys are getting engaged as early as 5, 6 years old. Fathers are taking them under their wings. It's kind of like akin to fixing cars with dad. Type of.
Yeah.
It's something that fathers and sons can do together. Fathers and uncles, fathers and big, little brothers and big brothers. It's akin to something that they can do together, and they're learning in community at a much early age than a lot of the girls are learning. So there's a lot of things. There's no one factor. I like to say it's whack-a-mole. It's whack-a-mole. It's optics, just doesn't look right. It's education level, where these young ladies are starting, or young women of all kind, where they're starting, when they're starting. It's the comfort level, like you mentioned, just corporate interest in keeping things consistent. It's just muscle memory, corporate muscle memory.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of things. It's not one thing. It's many factors.
Yeah. Now that you mentioned those things, like the way they look or the way, they do things on when they learn, I just kind of want to comment because I follow like 2 female music producers, and they both look very different. They both, try to put content out there for people to learn and everything. But something that kind of just is crazy to me to see is that comments from mostly guys that would be like, one of them is very, into being very feminine and dressing how she wants. So the comments are like, oh, well, you just dressing like that because you want to have more views, and you're not really about the music production. It's just you want views. The other one is just, wearing a normal shirt and a hoodie and just showing the knowledge she has. Oh, well, you are not taking care of yourself. You don't look, presentable enough. This is so like wrong to see. So it's like, what do you want? You have both, and both are wrong somehow. It's just like mind-blowing for me to see those things.
Yeah. So a lot of comments out there.
Yeah. We have 2 last questions. The first one is, what are some future plans and upcoming projects for Gender Amplified that we should look forward to?
So we're releasing an EP, which we're very excited about, on Women's International Equality Day in August. Future Number will be a part of that EP. So we're excited about that for sure, to hear some of the other songs that have come out of our camps. And obviously we have more camps to do this year, which we're currently curating. Once again, they are private camps, but you can once again follow us online and check out some content from our previous camps or camps that are to come.
It's so exciting. I'm very excited to hear that EP. If it's anything like Future Number, I'm sure it's going to be just amazing.
I'm so glad that song resonates with you, because the first time I heard it, it really resonated with me. And one of the things I like to think Gender Amplified is doing is providing our own like little Motown experience. And one of the things about Motown that is I'm a huge fan of is the fact that the organization was started by a songwriter. Berry Gordy was a hit songwriter. He'd done a lot of work with Jackie Wilson's, one of the most popular artists at the time, and also had cuts on other artists, and decided to get into the business of pressing and producing his own records because he was an exploited songwriter. And so his idea of taking control of the situation was to take full control of the supply chain, from the inception of the song to the actual marketing of the records in the stores. But one thing that was never lost on him, and certainly was never lost on any artist that he brought into the Motown family, was his appreciation for a great song. And Valerie Simpson, who was a staff writer at Motown for a very long time and wrote huge hits with her writing partner, Nick Ashford, she said that Motown was a songwriter's dream. And I like to think that that's because Berry Gordy understood the supply chain so well that he knew that there was no way to have a great record without a great song. And I like to think about the Control Room series much like Motown, in that we focus on songs. I'm coming as an engineer to Gender Amplify, as a producer, is what I do for a living. So, the appreciation that I have for just a great song is so deep and so fertile within me. that to hear you have the appreciation that you have for Future Number is the same appreciation that I had, lets me know that the song has legs. And I knew that when I first heard it, and I don't know how far it's going to go, but I know it has legs,
Yeah.
And that's great. Like when you can write a song and many, many people from different walks of life can appreciate it, and it means something to them in such a way that it has legs and has a potential to live for a very long time and travel very far. And it's very exciting. And I hope like we could revisit this conversation in maybe a year, 2 years, and the song has done some amazing things. So thank you. And there are more songs, they just keep coming. Like every camp we do, the songs keep pouring in. It's just like, oh my God, I can't believe this idea I had has turned into this incubator for great songs.
Just amazing. And I think it's just what the music industry needs right now.
Yeah, thank you.
Definitely. Yeah, and then our last question is, what is the soundtrack of your life?
Oh man, somebody asked me this the other day. I listen to everything. I'm listening right now to like a lot of Ashford and Simpson, a lot of Valerie Simpson, who's half of Ashford and Simpson. I'm listening to Willow Smith. I'm listening to Remy Wolf. I listen to a lot of SZA. I listen to quite a bit of Lennon and McCartney. I love the White Album by the Beatles. Listen to that obsessively all the time. I love all the young like female rap artists. I'm like really into like Glorilla and City Girls and Baby Tate and Rico Nasty. Those are some of my favorite like more contemporary rap artists. And then I'm listening also to a few folk artists that you may or may not know. So Rhiannon Giddens and Allison Russell and a lot of really great artists out of Nashville, because I produce records out of Nashville quite a bit. So I'm always there working on something. So that has introduced me to a whole slew of folk artists that I didn't know anything about. So yeah, but I listen to a lot of Whitney Houston, like a lot, like a disrespectful amount of Whitney Houston. A lot of female artists, and a lot of like Fleetwood Mac too. I love Lindsey Buckingham is one of my favorite producers, so.
Yeah, that's great. Again, thank you so much for coming, talking to us, taking the time. It's been a pleasure to hear your experience, learn from you. We think it's really important to have these conversations and put this information out there for people to learn more and get to know more. And yeah, so before we go, is there anything else you want to share with our listeners or anything else you want to put out there?
No, I mean, thank you for this platform. Thank you for all that you're doing for the community, and just happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride. Okay, thank you. Thanks for listening. Make sure to subscribe and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, on TikTok at STO Lives Podcast.